Oh, I'm so happy to be here. Okay, so we're live.
Me too.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna repeat this again. We can edit out anything, so we can
Okay,
just
awesome.
start talking about anything and everything. Um, so where should we begin?
Hmm. I guess what comes to me immediately is what's on your heart today.
Yeah, what's on my heart today? Oh, I think there are a few things for sure. So many things actually. Huge thing on my heart comes back to what we were just talking about pre-hitting record, just around what it means to be successful in the spiritual business and spiritual realm, how to navigate between logic, reason, what makes sense, how to lean into our intuition, how to follow really our hearts when we're in a space of running a spiritual business and beyond. So really how to follow our hearts, I would say, just in general life, especially like in uncertainty.
Mm.
And then how to, like, with that, something that's been coming up a lot for me is like how to navigate the like fear, the anxiety, and the overwhelm that can come with not just being on a spiritual path, but being on a spiritual path and in business also, and sustaining ourselves financially.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think this is really great, all of these things. And what's so cool is that since we just started recording, immediately what I've been feeling in my heart just for like the last minute is when you don't know what to believe in yourself.
Mm.
And I think this is maybe a good starting point. I don't know if you resonate with this, but what I've noticed really big going on in our world right now is we don't know what to believe. And this is because there's so much going on that's contradicting each other. So I'll use even our media, our news. There's conflicting resources being shared everywhere. And what this does is that it creates an internal and external belief of, I don't know actually what I can latch onto. Maybe in the past, it would have been easier to latch onto something. And I think when that happens, the only place that we can actually start to look is within. And so I think that's a big starting point for what we might talk about today is when that happens, do you keep trying to find places externally to believe in and to look at? Or is it time to become internal and start believing in that's within you?
Oh, I love this so much, and this resonates so deeply. My whole body has chills right now.
Me too. I'm like vibrating.
Me too. It's like this external versus internal, not even validation, but like fully sourcing, right? Like, where are we sourcing? What I was talking about last night in my masterclass is like my journey to sourcing safety, security, and stability in my own life, and how I think as I've grown, there's been a huge part of me that always sourced that from within that has given me some certainty on a path forward. And then there's been a huge also part of me that sourced that from outside of me in terms of even what safety means, even what security means, even what life it was that I should be living, was all based on external resources and external like stories and external media and guidance of who I should be and how I should be it, where it took me so many years to even come to this place of, one, balancing internal versus external, and then two, actually beginning to let go of the external altogether and focusing on the internal and letting that expand and grow and guide me.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And going on that path too, and talking about like, especially if you're someone who is either interested in starting a spiritual business or something, your own business, whether it's spiritual or not, what often can happen that I noticed myself falling into, and I don't know if you resonate with this, is that I had to look at what does success mean on a spiritual business path. And I had this like talk with myself a few weeks ago. So I had the belief that based on what I saw on social media, and this might just be me, that when you start your coaching business, that a threshold of success is how many people you're working with and how much money you're making. That's the parameter. And there's often a lot of sharing about how, you can make this amount of money, you can do this. And while that's all great, somewhere in the process, I realized that that wasn't actually my parameter of success. It was something that I just kept following because I thought that that was what it was. And you actually saw this. I lowered my coaching prices a few months ago because I realized, is this Rita's call, or is this just something I've been following because it's something I see everywhere? And what this did was it shifted me back into alignment. And my parameter of success has widely changed since then. And I'm sharing this because I think maybe others might resonate with this. If you're basing your parameter of success based on what you see others doing, you'll never feel successful. You'll never feel happy or fulfilled. Most people who start in a spiritual coaching business, what I would say could be a equal parameter of success is if you're able to fill your salary that you made working another job on your own terms. Is that not like incredible? Not
Oh my
even
goodness.
reaching $1 million, just literally 50,000, 60,000, 100, whatever it is that's equal to what you were at before. Isn't that like almost like a miracle or unbelievable?
Oh my goodness. It is such a miracle. I love this so much because I've been feeling this as well in the last few months and having these same conversations with myself. So all of this resonates so deeply. Where I've shifted, I think when I started my business, it was this idea of, it wasn't even an idea, it was this exploration of self and exploration of my own spiritual practice, and then exploration of sharing that with the world and what would that even look like and how would that be. And so my parameters of success at that time were literally just like, how good does this feel, and like how much can this expand, and like will people even want to work with me? And I remember just being so excited working with you, actually being like, oh my gosh, like I'm working with these people, or I've done these readings, or these are the things that I'm learning. And it was really like my success was all based on what I was learning and how I was feeling. And then over the course of months and time, that shifted, and I had probably a solid month-long period where, well, a few week period where I totally was sucked into that realm of, how much money am I making? How many people am I serving? How many followers do I have? How many people are converting into like wanting to work with me? What does that look like? And then even actually sharing that and talking about that. And it's funny because I built a whole program almost around like building, like moving from side hustle into full-time business and shifting out of your 9 to 5. When I began, that wasn't even why I started, right? Like I started because we can have it all and do it all. And I kind of consciously became aware of this through the process, and over the course of the last few weeks and months have been really almost stripping back down, what does success mean for me, and what does that look like, and what does that feel like, and is it even rooted in money? And so I actually did the same thing. I lowered my prices because I realized money isn't the most important thing to me, and I'm not doing this for the money. I'm actually doing this for the joy that it brings to me, right? And for the impact into the world. And I think something that you said to me, that you actually said to me and then also like shared openly over Instagram, was just coming back to that question of what really matters. And I've really been focusing and thinking on that, of what really matters. And this miracle of like, yes, even making the amount of money that you made is great, but what if we even strip that back more and ask ourselves, how much money do we need to make? Do we need to make the salary that we used to have? Or are we actually okay and sustainable with less than that? Or do we need more than that to be nourished, right? Like this question of what really matters and like what will nourish us so that we can continue to stay and operate and be in the core and the root of what actually does matter.
100%. And I think this is like really easy and almost maybe just a passage of growth, right? When you're learning these things and navigating it. And once you know it, then it's easier to just be like, okay, what does really matter? But what I know for me was that when I first started my spiritual journey, the thing, and maybe this relates to you too, the thing that made me in love with it was just, I felt so connected to everything around me. I wasn't obsessed with one thing. I was just like the universe, everything. So over the last few months, I'm like, when I started asking myself, what is success? I was like, that was successful. That was when I was the most happy. Like I've never been so lit up. And I noticed I had given some of that away unintentionally by focusing on goals and things that they weren't aligned anymore. They might have been at a certain point, but just not anymore. And so over the past few weeks, I've been really trying to tap into that. And being like, okay, well, universe, if I'm not focused on the financials, then how do I tap back into this? Because last time I did it, I didn't have a business. I was just free flowing, just exploring the world, right? There was no monetary thing. And what the universe has shown me was that I was forgetting that it's everywhere. Everything's abundance, everything you can tap into. And so I was like, okay, well, universe, can you like really show me examples of this? And if you ask the universe to show you examples, it will. And just that day, I had two things happen. The first one was I went to Whole Foods and I wanted to make all these smoothies. And so I bought 8 lemons. And I know that sounds like a lot, but I was debating whether to get the organic or non-organic, because the organic was $1 more per lemon. And I was like, you know what? I'm doing juicing. I'm gonna get the $8 more lemons or whatever. And I go to check out, and the woman takes my credit card and she goes, oh, that's funny. It didn't ring up any of your lemons. I guess you're meant to have them for free. And so I was like, okay, universe. So I got all these lemons, the Whole Foods lady just gave them to me. I was like, no, I'm more than happy. She's like, no, really, take them. And I was like, okay. And then, later on that day, I go to Nordstrom and I had to make a return on a shirt. And long story short, basically, they ended up saying that they overcharged me for the shirt and they gave me a $25 gift card. And I'm like, I don't think this is right. And she's like, no, it's right. And, so that was just like the universe, like winking at me being like, did you forget? Did you forget? And I was like, I forgot. I forgot that there's an infinite amount of ways that things can just flow and happen to us and we can't expect them. I never expected them. And it was just the universe winking. So I think when we can be more in that, we can be connected to our spiritual journey and remember the miracles that are constantly surrounding us in little ways.
Oh my goodness, Rita, I love this so much. And it reminds me even of two things. Just one, like as we become more and more connected to our purpose, to who we are, to why we're here, to what really matters, to the core, the possibilities truly become so limitless in terms of what we can do, how we can make money, how we can tap into what we need. And I don't even want to say make money, how we can sustain ourselves, right? So like how resources end up coming to us. And then the other thing that I've been really thinking about, but this morning as I was surfing, I was literally jet diving under this wave. And all these thoughts were flowing through me around specifically the expectations that come when we start on a particular path. And like here, I think we could say like being in a spiritual business or running any type of business, like once you start a business and kind of walk down this path, you start to expect that you do action A and like result B comes forward, right? Like you do X, Y, and Z, and then you make money, or you like post on Instagram and then someone wants to work with you, or you, I don't know, write a blog post and like 10 more people follow you, or whatever the expectation is, right? Like we almost start like doing and sourcing based on what we expect to happen. And then we can maybe like lose our light here as well whenever the things that we expect don't come to us. But what was coming to me as I was surfing this morning and literally like going under the water was this realization of how can we let go of the expectations and realize that so much more than what we could even in our minds comprehend will come to us in ways that we have, again, no real idea how or why or what they'll even be, right? There is no actual predefined path. And I think we know that we're on the right path when it's like not a path that someone else has walked, when it's not a path that's been laid out in front of us, when there is literally no expectation that we can have in front of us because we're forging that path as we go,
100%. I love that. It's not paved wherever you're going, or if you're following your own path, it's not paved, which means that it's going to be, there's going to be unexpected things and you won't necessarily have someone else to look for those answers. Only that's literally you have to go within for that.
Yeah. So when it comes to then parameters for success in your spiritual business, how are you redefining those now?
Ooh, good question. Number one is, am I happy? If I'm doing this work and I don't feel that, and maybe not happy is the right word, but that deep sense of connection to the universe, like one, I'm not serving myself and I'm not serving anyone I work with. Like, that's
Mm.
not authentic to who I am. And of course, that doesn't mean I don't have bad days. Like, we're all human beings, but that's my original intention for why I did this. So anytime I feel like I'm not connected to that is a sign of, hey, like, you need to readjust. And actually, Jay Shetty said something the other day that I really resonated with, which I've also been using as a parameter of success, which is when you're by yourself and there's no one with you, you know, you're meditating, you're alone in your car, do you feel content with your life?
Mm.
And that is a question I've been asking myself like a lot lately. And like, I feel like I'm back in it. But I definitely felt like a little bit like, hey, you need to redefine. And when you know that, though, it's so easy to come back into alignment. Just knowing the right question to ask. If the answer is no, you're like, okay, great. Now what gets me back there? So that's the number one thing for me for success. And then number two is definitely meaningful connections. Like, yeah, I feel like I really do feel like I'm the luckiest person to do what I do. Like, this has been, I don't even know how, I just feel really blessed to do what I do. And that's something I remind myself of every single day. Like, the fact that I get to have these kind of conversations and connected to the universe, and that's my career. And it really is me. It's just me, but it's also turned into a career, which is really, really cool.
Mhm. Mm. Oh my goodness. I resonate with both of these so deeply, so much. I was just talking with someone, I think I've even said this to you um, last night, just about back when I was in college. I took this class called Death, Dying, and the Meaning of Life. And a
Hmm.
professor came in, oh, so good. And the first thing he said, the first day of class, the first thing he said to us, he walked in the room and said, if you were going to die 1 month from now, what would you do? And everyone had all of these answers of all the ways that they would change their life and all the things that they would do or cram in before the month was over. And I realized in that moment that, like, wow, I remember being like, holy shit, I wouldn't do anything differently. I would literally continue living my life every single day exactly the way I'm living it right now. And I was like, wow. And it was that moment that made me realize too, I must be really happy. And you're right, happy is not the right word, but it was like this deep sense of contentment and fulfillment in like the mundane, ordinary existence that I was living because I wasn't doing anything super impactful. I wasn't changing the world. I wasn't even really like deeply connected with a lot of people around me, right? Like I was literally living this mundane, ordinary existence, but so deeply rooted and connected in myself and in like this learning of wisdom as I was studying philosophy that I felt so happy and fulfilled. And I realized, you know, maybe 5 or 6 years later, I found myself in a position of living a life that was completely out of alignment. And it's funny because I was driving down the road one day and I asked myself that same question of if I were going to die a month from now, 4 months from now, 6 months from now, 2 years from now, what would I do? What would I do differently if I knew? And I realized everything in that moment, everything. I would change everything that I was like the way that I was currently living and existing. And so I think this is such a beautiful parameter of success, like in our personal lives, but especially in our businesses, because oftentimes we look at these two things differently where we think our business again needs to be defined by like metrics. How much money are we making? Are we as successful as the people around us who are doing the same things? What does success even mean? Are we productive? Are we moving every day, right? Like, are we especially in the space of like spirituality and personal development, are we developing ourselves? I was just talking to someone else who was thinking about joining another course or program, and while I'm a coach, I actually said, what if you just did it? What if you
Yeah.
just like looked inside yourself and realized you have the answers already and you don't need to like move on to the next thing to like to reach whatever rung you're trying to reach on the ladder, right? So
Yes.
I think that's so so beautiful. It's like alone, do you feel content with yourself? Do you feel content with your life? Do you feel content with the work that you're doing?
Yes.
um oh, it's so beautiful.
You know what? I love all of that. And I agree with you too. Like, what comes to me immediately is like, this is, I guess, the third parameter if I was to make it up right now, because it just
Hmm.
came. Like, how is my life being shaken up? So I think
Mm.
stagnancy for me is a huge area where I am very dissatisfied. So if my life becomes stagnant, um, it doesn't feel good for long. And maybe this is for many of us. And um, like what when you kind of said that about the courses, what came to me is like, will that course shake up your life? Like, and is that shake
Mm,
up actually needed right now? Because sometimes we
yeah.
become addicted to like self-development, but to the point
Yeah.
where it's actually not helping. Like we haven't even processed the other stuff or like lived our life, right? So
Mhm.
knowing when you need the shake up, when you don't, like if we're
Mm,
really stuck in patterns, and not even in a business sense, but this was more for me in a relationship sense. So
mm,
a lot of my learning over the past, especially 3 years, has been with relationships, like romantic relationships. And
mhm.
what I noticed when I started this spiritual journey was I would be afraid to tell men what I did. Like, and maybe other people listening, whether you're man or woman, can relate, but what I would find is I'd be on dates and I'd be like, oh yeah, I do coaching, like life coaching, like see what they're feeling. And then I'd be like, and it's a little bit spiritual. And then I was like, what are you doing, Rita? Do you hear yourself? Like, are you kidding me at the moment? Who's talking? Like, you have a whole Instagram dedicated to this. What are you, and they'd be like, do you have Instagram? And I'd be like, no, um, so what I did was then I was attracting people though that then would reflect back to me this, right? So they would be like, oh, that's weird, or like they would see my crystal or something and just like make fun of it basically. And it
Mhm.
kept me in this cycle. And I was like, all right, Rita, we're gonna shake stuff up. Like if this was an area of your life where if I was gonna die in a month, would I have been satisfied with the quality of people that I was meeting?
Oh,
Like to some degree, of course, yes, but to another, I was like, no, there's a part of me that wants to be seen on such a deeper level. So I just went on my
mm.
dating apps and I just basically put I'm a witch. Like, and if you're gonna hang out with me, like understanding that I have a spiritual business is really important. And all of a
Mm,
sudden, the gates opened, and
mm,
the people I met, whether it ended up just being a friendship or more, it was
mhm,
incredible. But it took
mm,
me shaking up literally all of that. And that's the example that comes to me where like
mhm.
the people could come in, but until I was willing to shake up myself and put myself out there, nothing changed.
Oh my goodness. I love this so much. It's like there's so many parallels too, like in the relationship sense, in the career sense, in the business sense. Like, um, uh, first of all, I have to say I resonate with this so much. It's even just so I just started seeing this new person who is like maybe one of the most amazing, kind, wonderful, deep people I've ever met. And I've been very open about my work and what I do and things like that. I mean, I think probably there's still room for me not to hold back quite as much, right? But it's funny because I was meeting this new group of people and we're all having dinner and like his friends are like, what do you do?
Yep,
And
yep, yep.
I was like, oh, actually, I work for Microsoft, but I'm quitting my job
Yeah.
and like I won't be working there for in the next few weeks I'm out and I own a spiritual business, but I actually didn't even say that. I said, oh, and I have my own business on the side. I do like psychic readings. And I just like threw like very directly threw that out there because I was like, what's gonna happen if I do this? And I definitely got those like a little eyebrow raise, right? But also like total acceptance of like, oh, okay, that's really cool. Let's talk more about that, right? Like let's talk really deeply about that. And what I've learned is as I've opened myself more in this space, um, the the depth of conversations that come from that have been so just like enriching and soul filling and just exactly the things that I've been wanting and needing. Where what you mentioned before is when I held back there would be a level of not even just depth that was missing, but almost a level of discomfort of or conflict of I'm not able to express my full self. And it's no one's fault but mine, right? Like
Yes,
it's me that's
yes.
doing that. It's nothing else. And I love this so much because it parallels into like the career and into the business world too, because a lot of people that I work with are scared to put themselves out there in the realm of their spiritual business. And a
Yes.
lot of people are like, I need to quit my job in order to start this business. And to this, I say, actually, I was literally just talking about this last night too in the masterclass of notice how you show up in your current career. Like, notice how you show up in your life today, right now, your career, your family relationships, your friendships, and how much of yourself do you actually show? How much of yourself how much of yourself you actually even connected to enough that you can like, and what safety do you have you created in yourself so that you can fully be authentic in whoever it is that you are, whatever it is that you're interested in, whatever it is that you work on, what you really truly care about, what matters the most to you, right? Like, how much of that are you showing in your career? And then what are the thoughts that are going through your mind as you're working in your 9 to 5 that you hate, right? Like, how are you able to spiritually be 100% present in a job that isn't satisfying you? What do you do about that? How do you react? What do you say to yourself in those situations? What do you say to yourself when you're meeting someone new and you don't want to tell them what you do or what you're interested in? Like, what's the story there? Because whatever that is, when you do quit your job, when you do end your relationship, when you do find someone that's at the frequency you want to be at, it's important to be aware of the thoughts that existed in these other spaces, because they're actually going to carry over, right? Like, the places we inhibit and hold ourselves back in our relationships and our careers and our lives are the same exact places and stories that we use to inhibit ourselves and sabotage ourselves in our businesses and in our own development, right? And so I love, like, even coming back to that addiction of personal development, like, there is a level of how much are we distracting ourselves from our core, from what's inside of us, from what really matters to us, by using personal development outwardly, or by using our careers, or whatever the thing is, right? Like, how much are we distracting ourselves by what's actually going on within, by just not even being honest outwardly of what's going on within, and focusing on just like the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, or the numbers or the measures of success, or the people who accept you, or the quote unquote connections that we have that are not, again, rooted from the heart. So I think this is so beautiful, because I think when we are distracted, that's when we become stagnant, right? Like, when we do let ourselves move away from the heart space, that is when we stop, we could say, moving, because we're always moving no matter what, but that's when we really don't feel that movement, right?
1000%. And I think there's like so much good stuff in that and so much to break down, but I love that you just fully expressed yourself. Like, I do psychic readings, point, end of statement. And then, like, there's kind of like sometimes that awkward like pause, but honestly, I think when you're shattering realities or like just changing up what's normal to talk about, or in that group dynamic, there's going to be a little bit of like an uncomfortable pause.
Yes.
And that's okay. And that's good. Like, that's good, actually, and I think just being okay in those moments, and like, I don't need to over justify, I don't need to explain it. I can just, until the conversation continues. It's so powerful. And yes, to being distracted too, where, I mean, I think distraction, I don't know the actual definition, but if I had to guess, it's probably like avoiding what is, or, and if we think about that for a minute, I wonder why we would avoid what is. I don't really know. It's such an interesting human thought, because it's uncomfortable. So I guess this all comes back to being uncomfortable, and being okay being uncomfortable, and being okay making others uncomfortable. Yeah, I think that's what a lot of this breaks down to. And maybe that's also a metric of how you can define if you're, I don't want to say successful, but if you are fully in alignment, maybe being uncomfortable is part of it.
I love this so much. I do think you're absolutely right. Like, what a good question. Why would we avoid what is? And I do think the discomfort of what actually is, what is present, is so real. And there's also this important distinguishment between, because I think immediately about, especially in personal development, there's this almost like aching push for, if you're not uncomfortable, you're not on the right path. If you're not like, do the thing that makes you uncomfortable. And I agree and disagree with that. I think oftentimes our level of discomfort does very much indicate that we're doing the right thing, right? Because oftentimes when we do the right thing, the thing that scares us is the thing that is going to unlock the next level of growth. And there can still be addiction to that. I'm going to make myself uncomfortable and I'm going to expand. I'm going to make myself uncomfortable and I'm going to expand. But it's like, how do you know that you're uncomfortable in the right places and the right areas, and that you're not just, again, avoiding what actually is, right? Like, how can we sit with what is? And this is like, I have chills again, because this is like,
you too.
It's what I've been meditating on probably for the last almost month, especially as I leave my job, really getting comfortable with not just uncertainty, but just the potential for nothing, the potential
Mhm.
for spaciousness. And what I'm really learning again and again, because I've learned this, I think, before and before and before and before, as we often have to do sometimes, but that when we have time and space and openness, we tend to fill it, right? Like whenever when we have an opening, we put something there. When we have no plans, we make a plan. And I
Yeah.
think this is true in our businesses as well. And oftentimes, I think what we do avoid is literally nothing, like capital N nothing. And this is why we keep moving, and this is why we keep doing, and this is why we look at metrics, and this is why and I'm not sure, like this is such a good question, like why would we avoid what is? Um, because I do think discomfort is part of it, but like there's something deeper there, I feel, of like why would we avoid nothing? What does that mean? What meaning do we place on that? And yeah, and I say this because the more I work with and explore the nothingness, the more I realize that it's actually the nothingness, it's the spaciousness that allows us to, one, even listen to, hear, tap into our intuition. And then
Yeah.
two, it's the nothingness and spaciousness that allows us to actually express and say what matters. Like
Mhm.
that's what allows us to connect to what really matters. But oftentimes we fill up all of the nothingness with some things. Um, and
Yeah.
then I think in doing that, we forget what matters, right?
I think you're very right. And also like what comes to me too is that the uncomfortableness we might be talking about, like even that we can trick ourselves into believing we're constantly doing it when we do it in areas we're comfortable in. So for example, it's like, oh, well, I just invested in this program and I just did this again. And it's like every time it's a stretch, yes, but it's an area that we're already comfortable stretching in. So, right, like maybe it's like, oh, I'm totally not comfortable maybe doing like a photo shoot or something, right? Like, so we avoid it because that area feels like, nope, or I'm not comfortable making a video online, but I'll keep stretching by, growing my portfolio here or whatever the story is, because it's different for all of us. So I think that's where maybe imbalance starts to happen, is when we're neglecting one area. So for an
Yeah.
example for anyone listening is, I've gotten very good at hard conversations in business, and I would neglect it in my personal relationships. And it wasn't until I realized that there was something different going on in both, that I realized, oh, you're comfortable doing this in business because that's what you've worked on, and in corporate, you had to get very used to that. But in personal ones, you would ignore it. And so, because that felt uncomfortable.
Mhm.
So being aware of
Mm.
that gives us a lot of power.
Mhm. Oh my goodness, so much power. Yeah, so much power. And so, how do we know? Like, let's go into this more. I'm curious from you, like, how do we know what we're really neglecting and what we need to? I want to be careful in using the word need, because I don't think we need to do anything. But, how can we become more and more aware of the areas that we're neglecting, or maybe distracting ourselves from or distancing ourselves from, so that we can then, if we choose to, get to the core of what's driving that?
So I can only speak for me, and maybe this will help. Like I had to look at what were my desires for this lifetime. Like, did I only
Mm,
want to doing business? Do I want a partner? Do I want a house? Do I want to travel? Like, what are my desires in life?
mm,
And then with the way I'm acting right now, am I co-creating those desires in every area? So I can want a partner, but if I'm not willing to have the uncomfortable conversations in that area, that desire is unable to come into fruition until I focus on it. So,
mm,
and that's something I'm very conscious of, because it's something that's the area I've been focusing on more. And
mhm,
for everyone though, it's different, right? Like you might, um, like let's say that you're someone who really wants to have a certain amount of money like saved in your bank account, but you refuse to look at it. Like you're kind of like, oh,
mm,
I'm not, I don't want to talk to an accountant, I don't, the avoidance.
mhm,
um are you cultivating an atmosphere where that can heal? And
mm,
you'll know because you feel that like tension in your stomach when you think of doing it. Like that's usually a great
yeah,
indicator. That's where to look. Or
mhm,
if you get defensive about an area, like that's usually a great indicator that there could be something that your soul desires that you're neglecting.
yeah. Oh, I love this so much. Like, what are you cultivating? Are you cultivating the environment that's going to allow you to have the things that you want? Are you even working? And are you even working toward your desires? But like, by working, I mean, are you even conscious of your desires, right? Are you conscious how you're allowing space for your desires to come into fruition? I think this is so important. And I would say, or ask really again, more like, what are your desires then when it comes to business? Like, where does business fit in the scheme of your entire life, especially being that you're in spiritual business? How dedicated and devoted do you feel you need to be? And I'm asking this question because a lot of times people come to me and they have this belief of, I can't be successful and have a relationship or a successful marriage or a family or the things that people desire outside of just work and business, right? And
Yeah.
I think this is really important to understand, like, even just from your perspective, where does this fit in your life, and then how might this look for others as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for me, my spiritual awakening was very radical, meaning like it completely changed my life very fast. And then I didn't know that it would be a business or like that it would be who I
Mm,
am, what I'm doing. And so what started to happen was I started to think this was about like last year, there was a point where I thought, well, maybe I should take a step back and like be a bartender and reconfigure. Like I was like, this just feels very overwhelming.
mm,
I'm getting a little bit lost. Like I feel disconnected. And this goes back to again the measurements of success.
mhm,
And what I realized was that energetically, I felt like I didn't have a choice. Like I felt like even if I tried to go to corporate, like I didn't have a choice. And this made
mm,
me feel suffocated. Like it instead of it feeling empowering, it was like you literally, your soul signed up for this. This is what you're doing. And that doesn't feel good. Like even if that's the
mhm,
truth, like that, and I don't know if that's the truth, but that didn't feel good.
mhm,
So I needed to come back to this question of how do I want to be of service? And when I'm in this energy, I show up so much, at least for me, I show up just like so easily. Everything feels good. There's nothing wrong. Like I just enjoy these conversations. Like life is amazing. So I was coming from a I have to do this energy because I felt I didn't have a
mm,
choice versus like how can I just connect with the universe and be of service?
mm.
And when I think like that, I can't think of myself doing anything else. And that feels like very empowering. So it really depends. A lot of this is about intention, being really honest with yourself.
Mm,
Because sure, I could go back to corporate, I could go do other things, but I had this come to moment, which was like, what would your life look like if you did that? Would you be
mm,
like, would that meet your requirements for success? And the answer was immediately no.
mhm,
Maybe that could change in the future, right? But I had to really sit and
mhm.
ask myself these hard questions of why are you doing what you're doing? And
Yeah.
I think often there can even be this ego. This has happened for me, which is like, well, I'm meant to be doing this. And that's actually from ego. And I
Mhm,
had to really accept that within myself of like, okay, well, without that story of like, you have to be doing this or you should be doing this, would you be doing this? And the answer was yes.
mm,
So it's showing up for the sake of showing up, not because it's what my soul signed up to do. It's just literally like, if I'm going to be here and on this earth and I'm going to
mm,
get to choose what I do, is this what I choose? And the answer was yes.
I love this so much. And oh man, I love this so much. And there's so much resonance here. Um, and then how have you navigated this like desire to show up in your business while reconfiguring what your parameters are for success and beginning to look outward? I don't want to say outward of your business, inward of yourself for the other desires that you have in your life. So like, how are you integrating business with your personal life and with your relationships, like romantically, friendship wise, family wise? How is that? How do you manage all of that?
Yeah, great question too. So, well, I'm actually dating someone at the moment, and he's helped me a lot because he's an entrepreneur, and he asks me really hard questions. So he's constantly questioning, making me question everything. Like I would
Mhm,
say he's much more of like a philosopher than like following the spiritual path, but I think he does that
mhm,
more to like get my brain thinking. And for me, having people around me like that I now know is a constant desire for myself because what this
mhm,
does is it keeps me constantly in check with my intentions and where I'm going. Um,
mm,
so for example, this past weekend, him and I were talking and we had like a 2.5 hour talk where I was explaining my business and he was kind of asking a lot of questions, and he actually led me to a huge breakthrough. And it was because it was just question after question that I find hard to get to on my own. So
Mm,
that's something that's important in my life, is that there are people around me who constantly ask me hard questions that hold me back, or that hold me in alignment with who I want to be. And so
mm,
that's really uncomfortable conversations. Like, I could feel myself getting a little bit like emotional. Well, like, it doesn't work this way. I've tried this doesn't work. And he's like, okay, we'll just go a little further, you know? And I was like, okay. And then it
mm,
led to this huge release. So I don't know if that fully answers it, because I'm still kind of navigating this, like figuring it out. But I do know I feel in alignment. Like, I feel like this is where I'm meant to be. And it's a moment of like trial and error, a lot of that, and having people around me who are willing to just experiment. Like, experimenting in any
mm.
capacity, I'm always down for that. And I feel like I don't do well when I'm around people who don't push me to experiment.
Mm, I love this so much. Okay, I want to just validate that this makes perfect sense and totally answers the question. And even deepening more into it, it's I want to highlight or illuminate that, you know, for you to even have this, to have relationships that are able to open you through hard questions and keeping you in alignment with yourself, you first have to be open yourself to like what's inward, right? And share what's really deep inside of you with those around you, which is difficult. And then on top of that, you have to be willing to like really embody your your like your true self, right? Like your highest self. You have to embody the work it is that you're bringing forth into the world, almost like shamelessly and unabashedly and so vulnerably, so that people can ask you the really hard questions, right? And I want to say this and highlight this specifically because I think a lot of times whenever we have spiritual awakening or even start deep personal development or start a business, because business starting a business is a spiritual awakening and does require really deep personal development and just pushes you off the cliff of like who you thought you were. um, Oftentimes it does shake up our life, and we feel that the people around us are not supporting us. But
Mhm.
what we find is that once we truly open ourselves and become vulnerable and real and honest with what's within, the people around us actually are supporting us and
Yes.
like will push us and support us to like grow and deepen, whether that be in current relationship or in new relationship, or you know, even family and friends. I had a breakthrough with my mom yesterday actually, where I think both of us were on different stories and telling different stories and triggering each other at like past wounds. When we got to the heart of the matter, we realized we share the same thoughts and feelings and desires for each other, and like, you know, desires for happiness and contentment. And so it's really beautiful. I want to touch into this though, because this is something that I know we talked about in the past. As you're being asked these hard questions, and specifically when you're working with someone that you might say is a little bit more philosophical, I resonate with this because I oftentimes, in the same way, I push and push and push with my friends. And I find that there's this really interesting balance that I have not yet mastered between the logical mind and, we could say, like the heart or the intuitive mind or the feeling, right? Like there's a knowing, this deep knowing that we have. And then there's also this, like, I don't even want to say logical mind, let's say like rational mind or human mind, or maybe even slightly ego mind. But I think sometimes we feel there's this battle going on between like what's reasonable and what works and what our mind wants and says, and then what we feel or know really deeply in our heart, but yet maybe we can't articulate fully. And so because the articulation's there, maybe it feels less logical or feels less reasonable, but actually is. And so I'm curious, as you're talking about being pushed in hard questions, how do you navigate that and almost integrate the heart and the head together, um, when it comes to your business, but also just when it comes to yourself and what you believe?
Yeah. Oh, such a good question. Oh my goodness, I have chills. So there's kind of 2 points to this, which I want to reflect back, which was like, for me, what I found throughout my life, when I don't ask or have people in my life who ask me the hard questions, I learn in really difficult ways.
Mhm.
So for me, it became a non-negotiable to constantly have, and maybe why I'm attracted to partners or people that are like this, not everyone, like, of course, but with my consent, like in that conversation I had this weekend, I was asking him, I'm like, I kind of knew, I was like charging in there, like, okay, so can you help me with this? And I knew that this was going to be that. And he even said, are you sure you want like to have this conversation? And I was like, yes, I want this. Because I knew that we could have this amazing connection and it was beautiful. And I even had an old spiritual teacher who she doesn't do one-on-ones anymore, but when she did, I would get scared before we would talk. And what I realized was like, wait, is this because I knew there was nothing wrong with her. Like she was incredible. But what I noticed was she's not going to bullshit me. She's going to hit me directly where I need to look. And I'm going to have to radically look at this. And I liked that. I was like, this is who I need. Because for me, that's the way I work. Others, and sometimes I have more delicate times in my life where I'm like, I really need you to sugarcoat this like lovingly. And then other times I'm like, just tell me where it is so I can fix it or I can go into it. And what I would say about the intuition of this is like, I know that that's what works for me at certain points. And then other times I'll literally tell people like, I really just need you to tell me you love me right now. And like, that's it, like no hard conversations. So it's all about knowing what works for us. But have you seen Top Gun? The new one? Okay.
Oh,
or
I haven't seen the new one, the old one.
Okay.
The old one, yeah.
I think in both of them, I haven't seen the old one in a while, but I just saw the new one this past weekend. And obviously like they're flying these like really expensive jets. And one thing he says in it, which I think kind of defines the line between logic and intuition, right? When you're flying a jet like that and you're in the military, obviously most of the time you're told, you're going to assume that's a logic thing, but it's not. He even says in the movie, he's like, don't think. Like your body and your soul, he doesn't use those words, but I would use those words, soul knows what to do. So when you're in life or death situations, how do we just know what to intuitively do? Oftentimes our intuition is just like that first impulse. It's when we sit in it too long that things become blurry. So what I've started to do even now, and I've actually done this in yoga, is like, even when the teacher's just saying what to do, I'm already doing it because I'm like, you already know. And this is like a great way to train our mind and body to kind of come into that, where I don't think we need to sit in our intuition as long. Like you can almost just start to flow with it and really go into it. Because I think, especially when you start a business, you go more into the logic of how does this work? And that's totally natural. And there's like definitely good to that. But for me, it's become important to still be in the intuition. So I'm acting more about like just immediate, like what wants to come up and not holding myself back. Like, does this make sense? Is this what to do? More just following that initial reaction.
I love this so much. I have to say that, especially when it comes to my business, actually, anytime, like in all the moments where I found the most success in the traditional sense, like when we're talking about money and measurements and metrics, it has always come from when I've just leaned into my intuition. And by that, I mean, like even starting TCP. And I have to say this because I know there are people out there who are like, I really want to start my business. I've been sitting on this idea for 8 years or for 3 months or whatever that thing is, but I just can't bring myself to do it. What you just said was so wise, is when we get that hit and then we sit in it too long, things get blurry. And then when things get blurry, we start to feel conflict. Whereas when I started my business, there were no thoughts around it. I actually didn't talk to anyone. I didn't consult anyone. I just reached out to you and said, hey, I think I want to do this. Can we start talking about it? And then I just continued to work. Like as I felt something, I just did it immediately. I didn't question it. I just let myself lean into it. It required a lot of experimentation, a lot of trust. Nothing made sense, right? And I think even having the thought of nothing's making sense right now creates that blur and that confusion, right? Like you're already out of the flow if you're thinking about how things aren't making sense. You're already out of the flow if you're like questioning what you're doing is right? So it's like you can, there is this level of being so deeply connected into your intuition, which doesn't mean anything, by the way. It just means that you feel something and you follow it without question, right? And I love this. And the other so anytime I've done this, like that's when I've been the most successful. That's when I've worked with quote unquote the most people, or I've brought in quote unquote the most amount of money, or I've felt the most deeply connected to my work. But then also just to echo that in a space less business wise, I know I mentioned this to you before as well, but in surfing, I think this is something I've learned over and over and over again, is like when I paddle out into the water and like, let's say the waves are really big, I can sit there and think about what wave I want to catch. And I can sit there and think about, even while I'm on a wave, like what it is that I want to be doing or how it is that I want to be surfing. But the times that I've had the most fun in the water, and we could say, quote unquote, surfed the best. So like looked the prettiest, had the most style, I don't know, whatever the terminology is around that, caught the best waves, were the times where I didn't think, but allowed my body to know. Like, it's really funny because even when I'm sitting in the lineup and I'm watching the waves coming, there's a level of, I'm either in my head thinking about what's going on around me, or I'm fully integrated in my body. And when I am, and a wave comes and I know it's the right wave for me, there's a deep knowing, and my body actually starts to move before even my brain has any indication of what it is that I'm doing. I'll feel the pull of my body shifting before I even have the thought of I should catch this wave. And like those are the times that I surf the best, and the sessions that I feel the happiest and most fulfilled and have the most fun, because there's a level of deep connection that exists that completely like bypasses the mind, right? Like completely bypasses the thought. So I think it's so important to connect in with that. I want to
Yes.
ask you, one, like how we can start to develop and connect in with that. And then two, I want to come back after you answer this question and talk about how we can begin to bring the brain and the mind along the journey with us, so that the rational mind, the reason, the logic can, I don't know, maybe integrate. But let's start with like, how do we tap into that intuition in the first place? How do we start to listen and feel and act?
Great question. So there's two things to this too. Also, I want to touch upon really quickly, because yes, we are souls or spiritual beings in a human body, but also because of our human experiences, especially if we've had a lot of trauma, you might find your gut reaction to be one of trauma. So that's also important to address. Like, for example, let's say that someone, I don't know, like if you were a kid or something and maybe your brother would like hit you on the arm, right? And so now every time someone does this, you like jerk back. The way to cultivate this and to know whether it's coming from your intuition or trauma is just to pause. Like when you get those first reactions, don't, when you first start to cultivate this, do anything, right? And you can get a lot of help with this too if it's very deep trauma, and like, you know, therapy or like with the spiritual coach or whichever way feels good to you. But noticing what a traumatic response feels like, because it's going to feel very jerky, versus an intuition is a movement. It's like a flow. And so one I would say is like the wave crashing on the wall, and the other is just the wave. But noticing for your own body what they feel like is going to be key. So otherwise you can get very, it can feel confusing. It can feel really confusing. So that's where I would say to start. And you can just intentionally sit with your body and ask, think of something that kind of, you know, does that for you, and just notice how you kind of clench. And then think of something where you felt like just a knowingness, like oh, I should do this, and how that feels. So that I would say that'd be the defining point. The number one way to do this for anyone that I would say to start is, if you're already very like clear, very easy to tap into your body, you can probably just practice. But if you're not, if this is something you struggle with, like definitely sitting in the nothingness, like just sitting with your body is going to be key, and being okay, being uncomfortable. And I would even say yoga or some sort of practice like that's a great way to do this, because you can just start tuning in with the teacher, get in the flow, and notice how intuitively your body wants to move. Like, I think that would be a really great way. And also what I've learned recently is like, if we have really blocked chakras, that can impact us a lot. So even just doing like a chakra cleanse or something every day, that can help to become more in tune with your intuition.
I love this. Oh, thank you so much. Okay, keep going.
Well, the other thing I was going to say, I think actually you and I talked about this, but I'm just like blown away by it. The Eckhart Tolle, what he said about hitting the ball as a soccer player. Did we talk about that briefly? Yeah.
I think we did. Yeah.
Oh, maybe not. But well, for anyone listening, it blew my mind. So I hope it blows your guys' mind. What he said was that the best soccer players in the world, they don't shoot right away. they pause. There's like, and it's not like something you would really notice with the human eye, but there's this very slight, like 1, 2, 3, and they kind of intentionally direct the energy of where the ball will go. And that little pause makes the difference between a knee jerk of just hitting the ball where then it has no control, or intentionally knowing where the ball is going to go. And even our intuition, like just last night, actually, I bought a course and I waited till the last minute. There was 3 minutes left before the thing expired. And I just sat and my intuition was like, yes. And then I was like, 1, 2, 3, yes. Okay, we're doing it. So I knew it wasn't just like oh, it's about to expire. You know, you need to get in on this. It was very much a grounded, like, this is still right.
I love this. And we did talk about this, the pause before the actual movement of the ball. And there's two things actually that come as I hear you say this now, is the intentional energy direction and also the groundedness, right? Like the pause to allow ourselves to like root down, and then using that root to direct the energy from the inside to the outside, right? Of what it is that's coming forward for us internally, and then where we're going to move that outside of us.
Yes.
That's so beautiful.
What also comes to me, because depending how our nervous systems are set up, if we're someone who, like, let's say something happens, like let's say they're like, you have 2 minutes to answer this question for $1 million, right? How many of us go into flight or fight, like noticing what your initial bodily reaction is? And if you're someone who freezes in those moments, you're going to want to incorporate movement. So I learned this from 2 different classes. I was taking a speech class, and like how before giving a speech, how much, movement's important in our face. So for anyone listening, if you feel like you freeze up and you don't know what to do, just move yourself, like scream, literally, like, brrr, like whatever it is that your body needs in that moment, that will give you the answer.
Oh, this is such a good like nugget of wisdom. I did not know this. I don't know that I'm one that tends to freeze, although what I'm learning about myself is that I sometimes scramble almost, right? Like there's like this internal scrambling that happens specifically when I'm excited, when I'm overly excited about something, like my insides almost like vibrate, and then the scrambling happens, and then I almost like, I'm learning the pause. The pause is important for me. It's almost like, okay, pause and ground, because if I allow myself to move from the scrambling, I start just like reaching for stuff, and eventually I find it, but it's like never starts with the right thing. Like the first thing I reach for and pull in is never the thing.
So like, I don't know if this resonates with you, but when I see that energy, like whenever there's like that excitement, it's like the energy is like all over, So what happens if you just focus on one spot? Does the energy keep scrambling, or does it come back?
It comes back.
Yes. And that's even something in physics that I'm not very scientific for anyone listening, but I've seen plenty of videos of how this works. And what they've shown is like, where you put your attention is where you put your energy, right? So with atoms, they've done these tests where they'll send them out like into random, like into the test. And what happens is the second there's a human subject who places their attention on a part of it, they come back.
Yes, I've heard this.
Yes. So, right, like talking about what's going on with your energy, if someone has that too, where it's like it kind of goes all over. And then the key to that would be refocusing your intention or your energy.
Oh my goodness, yes. I love this, and just like even little side thing, and then we can pop into the logic. But I was actually reading this, I think from Joe Dispenza,
Yeah.
almost around the atoms, but it's like what comes to me is whenever we focus our energy, and I'm actually gonna pull back from that and not even say focus our energy. So repeating what you said, when we focus our attention on something, that's where we drive or draw our energy, right? So where our attention goes, our energy flows. But what's really beautiful is actually when we focus our attention on something, not only are we directing our energy, but we're also, it's almost like integrating our energy with the energy of the thing that we're focused on, right? So I think about the atom, like the atom is, we could say, completely separate from us, but when we focus on it, it appears, right?
Yes.
So there's actually like a change that happens around us based on the energy that we're throwing out into the universe. And I think this is, um, there's a lot to this. I think.
Well, actually, I want to share something with you because this literally, I had this thought. I've never had this thought, but it came to me right before we talked. So I feel like it's supposed to come up. Okay, this is going to be a little bit out there, so I hope I can explain it well. But okay, they talk a lot about in spirituality, the third eye. And what I realized is like one of my favorite things to say to people is like, I see it happening for you. Like, you know, I see it happening for you. Like and if we can see it, right, that means the timeline, the probability is already opening, right? Because if we're talking about it, it must exist somewhere out there. But then today I had the thought, this isn't Rita who's seeing that. This isn't Marie who's seeing that. This is the eternal I that sees this as a possibility. And that's what I'm getting chills again, because it's like,
Me too.
This is what we're focusing the intention of the energy through the eternal eye of the universe. So, right, like whenever you want desire something for yourself and it's for the highest good, see it coming for, or even others, like when someone's struggling, and you want to send them love, see your love coming from the eternal eye of the universe, like this infinite wisdom, because that again is how energy flows. So imagine if it's coming from the universal consciousness, or, you know, I don't have more grounded words for it. I wish I did, but from that energetic source.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so when you said the eternal eye, full body chills, by the way. This is something that this is similarly, I don't think I have the words or the logic or the reason or the like science to explain this, but I remember years ago well before, because I say this quite a lot, but I think a year and a half ago now, somebody would have said, Marie, you're going to be doing psychic readings and you're going to be coaching with people. I would literally fall to the ground laughing. I'd be like, that's hilarious. I would never in a million years be doing that. And here I am. But years and years ago, I read this book called Travels by Michael Crichton. And simultaneously, I was reading this book called Consciousness. Oh man, I forget who wrote it. I think their last name is Koch, Koch. I think I could be lying about that, but it's a really, really great book. And the book Consciousness was all about the number of connections. So it was analyzing consciousness and what actually consciousness even is. And it talks about the number of connections that exist in the human brain. And what it says is that the only thing in nature, and I kind of disagree with this. I think there are so many more things now. And so it's been years, but the most comparable thing that we could look at outside of ourselves in nature to the human brain, to the number of connections in the human brain, is the Amazon rainforest. And by that, it's like the number of connections between the trees and the rainforest. And I remember reading this book when I was very deep into very logical philosophy. I was super like agnostic / like even atheist, like very much, I don't believe in anything. I believe in logic and reason. And I think I literally used to think math is the only objective truth that we have on this planet. Right. And so I was like very much in the space, but I remember reading that and thinking, oh my gosh, I wonder if the Amazon rainforest is conscious and like has consciousness, right? Like I had this thought, and then I was like, and at the same time, I'm reading this book, Travels by Michael Crichton. So Michael Crichton is the person who wrote Jurassic Park. Just for some backstory, he went to med school, actually became a doctor. He wrote Jurassic Park while he was in med school to pay for med school. It became like this big hit, became a movie. He kept writing sci-fi. This is like another example of just like following your heart, by the way. And he ended up in this completely other world of living and existence, but throughout his life, in between his writing and his movies and dedicating his time where he wanted to, he did a lot of traveling. And one of his favorite pastimes when he traveled was to see psychic readers. And he would like go to, I know, I had no idea about this. And he went to all of these different readers, and he would tell nothing about himself. He would be really cryptic. Sometimes he would lie about who he was. And like sometimes he would go daily to different people. And he just, I think, was curious at what would come up, and he noted the different things that came through different people. And he said something about, I don't remember exactly maybe what he said, but I remember in my mind I had this connection of, oh, I wonder if all of these people are tapping into just this other like dimension or reality. Like I couldn't quite explain it at that time, but I was like, I wonder if that's what's going on. And that kind of slowly started opening me more and more to like okay, there actually can be a logical explanation behind the phenomenon of what it is that you're receiving, or that I'm receiving, or that anyone on this planet is capable of receiving, right? That the Amazon rainforest might be receiving. Like after reading that book and reading Consciousness at the same time, I was like, wow, there is actually, like, there's something behind this that can explain this in a way that makes complete sense and that could dictate that this is total truth. I don't have what that is. I don't have the answer to that, but I think about that as, I hear you even talk about the eternal eye, right? Like seeing something for someone else. Oh, I have chills again. Seeing something for someone else, or seeing something, receiving information that's coming from someone else, realizing that it's not you, it's not Rita, it's not Marie. And I think what I've learned in my own spiritual business and practice is I've started like reading tarot cards and reading people's Akashic records and teaching people how to read the Akashic records and reading the Akashic records for businesses and plants and pets and like all sorts of things, is this realization of it's not me. And you and I were just talking about this when we got on the call before we hit record, this concept of I am never not completely blown away, in awe, completely just shocked at the confirmation that I receive from someone else when I get some sort of information and I give it to them and they're like, oh my God, like this is spot on, or oh my God, you knew this thing. I'm still, even though I'm in this line of work, I'm still shocked every single time. I'm still grateful every single time. I'm humbled every single time. And I'm also reminded every single time that it is not me. Like it is not me. Whatever it is that I'm seeing, however it is that I'm directing energy, even when I'm surfing and a wave is coming to me and my body knows it's the wave that I should catch, or that I don't know, that I need to move with this wave, even that I feel is not me, right? And like maybe I'm using my body to connect with whatever that is, and I can't explain it physically or logically or reasonably, but I just, that resonates so much, and I have so many chills because it isn't me, it isn't us, right? And yet it is, like we're connecting to something.
Yes. And I had tears in my eyes when you were saying that, because it's like, yes, there's so much truth to this, and what feels like truth, right? Like in our body, it resonates as truth, which is often those chills. What also is like, I think interesting too, which this is kind of coming through. There's, I think why maybe so many struggle with like differentiating between what's us, what's not, right? Like the ego and the spiritual thing, which this has been thousands of years talked about, probably since humankind existed. That I recently learned is that we're evolving on 3 different levels: mind, body, spirit, constantly. So it would make sense that throughout this journey, we have to constantly remind the mind and the body of who it really is. Because the spirit knows, right? The spirit's the one that we're saying doesn't associate with the action or what's coming through, right? But since our mind and body are evolving on the human consciousness level, it's like, that's why shadow work and all that stuff is so important, because it's a constant evolution. And I don't know, that feels like it's important to say, put along with that, of like why we forget, like even at the beginning, going back to this success metrics, we forget because we're all 3 and they're all evolving at different levels.
Yeah. Oh, that hit so hard and so home. My whole body's vibrating again. It's so beautiful. And it even answers like the second question that I was like, let's come back to this question. I think that's partially why I have chills too, because I'm like, this is what happens when we just let ourselves be guided. We talk about all the things that we want to talk about, and it all comes forward exactly as it's supposed to. We forget because we're all 3. So then how do we remind the mind and the body what we really are? Like, how do we bring the mind along in our journey spiritually? How do we keep that alignment?
I think this goes back to shadow work and radical honesty. So going back to even what's going on our planet right now, there is a lot of confusion, and that's because we can't look to the normal metrics we would of what's really going on. So for example, I was on TikTok. Everyone is living in their own reality to some degree. Like literally it can be the same subject. Like for anyone who watched, for example, the Johnny Depp trial, or, you know, there can be 30 opinions on the exact same situation. And we often forget that we're all in our own world. We are all in our own world based on our own experiences, our own traumas. For example, someone who had a lot of trauma might associate better with one person over another. It's not necessarily always objective. It's just based on what's our current reality that we're experiencing. And then when you kind of see all these things going on in the world that aren't being healed, they just keep resurfacing again and again, like gun law or gun control. That's an example where on both sides, there's very differing beliefs, but what's happening is like nothing is being healed in one direction or not. And then another problem is coming up, another situation comes up. It's like one thing comes up and then another comes up and nothing's being healed. And the problem with this is that our soul kind of remains always knowing, but our human evolution is changing rapidly. So for example, of course, we're going to be on a human level upset when you see your friends who are impacted by something, or you see people impacted by something. That's just human nature. But noting that the rapid nature that this is happening at the moment is the level you have to keep up with your shadow work, and the level that you have to keep addressing what's going on in the world. And sure, you could deplug from it. You can go live on a farm and meditate every day and be happy. And for some of us, we'll be called to do that. But for others, if we're going to live in this world and we're going to be an active part of it, we have to be active in the amount of work we're doing to address the amount of change and destruction that's actively going on.
Yeah.
So what my measure is, as long as we're in a human body, meaning someone has to eat, sleep, use the bathroom, we always will have to do this.
This is so, oh my gosh, this is so wise. It's almost like this is, so as you're talking, I was just kind of writing this little diagram of just like, even thinking about, I think gun control is such a great example, because there's like at the center, the root, we have like guns or gun control, right? And then outside of that, we have almost like two sides. We have two opinions of, well, two big opinions, and then lots of opinions around those big opinions about what's right or what's wrong or what is. And then like what I even wrote down is like, if we replace like gun control or guns with like healing, right? Like the center is healing. That's like the thing that it's like going back to the beginning, even of like, that is what is, right? Like the core of what is, that's the existence. And then it's almost like there's a bubble, and around that there's everything else. And it's like everything else is almost a distraction from like what is at the center and what is at the core and what really matters. Like so many things came to my mind as you were saying that. Like one of them specifically with gun control is like Brene Brown, and she talks about how, and I talk about this a lot too, I've actually written a few articles on this, like the logical fallacy of it's us versus them, like me versus we, right? Like it's either A or it's B, it's black and white, there's no in between. But like what actually is not an opinion, it just is, right? Like truth, there's no opinion about truth. Like truth just is, it just exists. Like what is real is just there. And so what also comes to me is like in tarot, there's a card called Justice, and the Justice card traditionally read says that like justice will be served, right? Like maybe sometimes someone will read it like someone has wronged you or something like that. But actually the way that I like to read this, and I have to credit Lindsay Mack for this, is that in order for us to live and act in justice or in peace, in order for us to transform anything in truth, and by that I mean like transform like the truth of what is into whatever we want it to be, right? We have to sit in what actually is first. Like the whole medicine around the justice card is like, yes, things feel unfair. Yes, like something bad is happening, and it's happening. So how can you like be in the thing that's happening fully before taking any action? It's almost like that pause before the kick, right? But it's like, how can you fully immerse yourself in what is actually true before like acting, or like by acting I mean stepping into like an activist type role, right? Like it says, yes, you've been wrong, but how can you sit with this and be here so that you actually know what's real? And I say this because a lot of times in work, in life, in business, we get so close to the truth, we get so close to the root of the matter, and then we we like flit away and we go take action based on what it is that we found, but we don't see the whole thing. And I think about this when it comes to like gun control or like abortion or any of the big topics that we talk about, right, or that we've been talking about for years and years and years, and we'll maybe continue to talk about for years and years and years in this country, is we oftentimes come so close to the root and then we develop an opinion and then we move based on the opinion, but we're not actually moving based on the root, if that makes sense, you know? And so it's like the reason a lot of these things are existing in our world right now and unhealed is because we're not actually allowing ourselves to sit with them and be with them and heal them. And I think if we even want to like take this back to the business perspective of having a spiritual business, something that I often lead my clients back to all the time is like, what is the actual work that you're here to do? And how can you be in that? And like this helps so much with the overwhelm, because again, sometimes we get so close to the root of what it is that we're supposed to do, but we don't allow ourselves to fully sink into it, that we start taking all of this action that is actually irrelevant. And so we do all of this work that's not actually healing the main thing, or not actually addressing the main thing, or not getting to the core, the root of what actually matters, because we don't allow ourselves to sit in that seemingly nothingness, right? We don't let ourselves sit in the discomfort. We don't let ourselves fully like release all of the opinions and the everything else that surrounds it, because we're so inclined to just like do and know and have certainty, right? I don't know, that's just what came forward in my mind.
It totally resonates. And I think what also is like true about that is that with what you said, like we're not sitting in the root of it until you know that everyone has a solution for everything. If you ask anyone, they're like, well, this is what we need to do. That's the solution. No one actively speaks on what's the problem to begin with. And until we actually all have like a conscious conversation of that and like really meet there. So for example, let's say someone is running their business and they keep having one successful launch and then the next launch flops, like it's a pattern. The solution, right, would be, well, you need to change coaches, or you need to change to Kajabi, or you need to do this, or you need to invest more here, or you need to take a vacation. But what is the problem that's leading to this, right? And so if we address that, maybe it would be, well, my worth believes that I can't have this. Okay, so if we address the worth, do you have to change anything else? And then will that actually just be the change itself? So of course there's a value to solutions, but not until we know what's the underlying thing or cause. And I think that what happens, which I don't know if anyone has the solution for everything going on in our world, or we would be in a much different place. But I think even just having conscious conversations is a flow of like, well, hey, if we just really talk about this for a second and sit in the discomfort, what does this actually mean?
Oh, this is so beautiful. And it's so underrated and requires such a deep level of trust, because even coming back to this concept of nothingness, I think in our society and just as human beings, we value productivity. We value, again, like measurements of success, like money, number of followers, number of people we work with, clients, years that we've been in service, like whatever the thing might be. We value the productivity aspect of it. And I actually had a boss at Microsoft that said once, busyness and productivity are two different things. And I think we shift away from, even though we value productivity so much, sometimes we actually aren't productive in our work because we're focused on solution instead of product, where actually the most productive thing we can do is like focusing on the root, right? And I think we lose this because we have this false sense of control of, if I do A, B is going to happen. We lose this trust in ourselves, trust in what's around us, because we want to control the solution or control the outcome, in actually just believing that maybe if we have a conversation about what's real, we don't have to even do anything, but everything's going to change, right? And it's this fear of, if I do nothing, nothing's going to happen. But actually, if we just subtly, oh my gosh, in yoga, this is one of my favorite things, like when you're like you can adjust your toes and the entire body will shift. And it's this beautiful thing of, if we can just adjust the way we look at something, maybe we don't have to do anything, but the entire world will shift, right? If we can all, oh, I have chills too, if we can all be in that frequency. And I think about just like a hard material example for everyone. I did a tapping session with Jess Blanche from Just Blanche Coaching. She's also my media manager. I don't know, a month or so ago, 6 weeks ago. And what was fascinating is it wasn't like the tapping that necessarily shifted consciousness for me. It was literally just me telling her what was true. And by that, I mean what I was afraid of, and her saying it back to me so that I could repeat it back to her while I was touching my body in different areas. Because literally all that I needed to do to shift everything in my reality was to simply acknowledge what was true for me. And I was like, even though I knew the fear that was existing in my life and my body at the time, I couldn't actually say them. And even just saying them once to someone, because oftentimes even when I come to you, Rita, in our sessions, I'll be like, this is what's going on in my life right now, and this is what I'm afraid of. Like that does a lot, but it's almost like the allowing yourself, because when I do that, it's like I'm coming because I'm like, what's the solution, right? Like let's talk about the solution. But like what we actually, and you always guide me back to this, what actually makes the biggest ripple effect and change and transformation for me is literally allowing myself to just sit in, acknowledge, and accept the problem that's there, and I don't even want to say problem, the way that I feel, right? It's like literally just acknowledging the truth. Yeah, it has so much power.
Yes. And like what also comes to me too, and thank you for sharing that. That's so powerful too, about just like acknowledging and having it repeated back to you what you were afraid of. But I think this is what's going on in a collective level with going back to even we could use abortion as an example. So a few months ago, I had a hard conversation. And when I had to reflect upon it, what I got told from one of my mentors was, because it didn't go well. And she said, you got too emotional. And I didn't like this answer. I knew it was true, but I didn't like this answer. Well, I was like, what do you mean? How am I supposed to not be emotional in those moments? And she's like, you can express truth and not be emotional. And that was what you had to learn from that situation. So I was like, okay. So if we look at everyone right now, if we think of abortion, on every side, everyone's emotional. Everyone. I mean, I'm sure there's some people who are somewhat indifferent, but probably very few people, because it directly impacts every woman and maybe their wives or their sisters or their daughters. So let's say someone's for it, someone's against it. At their core, they might be saying all these different reasons. Why are they for or against it? It all comes down to identity. So who do we believe we are, right? So, and this is the same thing with gun control. If we're saying we're for one statute for another, every single person at their core, very likely, is for it for protection of children or protection of people, right? Protection of rights. The word protection probably comes up. Freedom. Everyone probably to some degree wants freedom, but they want the freedom to feel safe or the freedom to be able to hold a gun. It's very similar words. So our values are actually very similar, just being expressed in different ways, because humans have very similar values. So with abortion, like if someone, let's say, is religious, so they're like, well, I'm not for abortion because if I'm for abortion, then that means I'm not a good person. And then that means I won't go to heaven. So if I'm not a good person, I need to express that word. That's the belief going on with them, with their identity. Then someone who's for it might say, well, I'm not a good person if I don't advocate for the rights of my body and someone else's. So it comes down to their belief system of literally what's right and wrong. And again, it's a belief system. I don't know if anyone can say what's true or what's not true. And I mean, that can be broken down in like, yes, on a logical level, of course, we can follow that differently, but on an energetic level, that's what's playing out. And that's kind of what I meant about everyone's in their own reality. Of we're all trying to defend our own identity. So being able to have these conversations, like one thing I always say is like, always like have people around you who do not agree with you. This is the most empowering thing and you can have, because it constantly makes you reevaluate who you think you are. If you're surrounded by people who always agree with you, that's a problem, big problem. Because you're getting confirmation bias, they're reaffirming who you are. And that's even why that teacher scared me so much, because every time I'd be like, oh, I'm doing great. And she'd be like, right in the heart, and I'm like, I'm going to just flop over and die. But that's good. That's good, because it really holds you accountable to who you believe you are.
I love this. Oh my gosh, I love this so much. And this question of who do we believe we are, even like who do you think you are? And then just this idea that we're all actively trying to defend our own identities, like this idea, I want to say this truth because we all are like constantly, and it comes back to even what you said in the beginning, and even coming back to our businesses and our lives and how we choose to live, of always constantly connecting with like, who am I consciously, right? Because we source our identities outside of us. So like coming back to that internal versus external validation and internal versus external sourcing, we source we source who we think we are based on the people around us, based on the stories around us, based on the media around us, based on, and this is something I noticed actually even in this last week in Mexico. We source who we are and like what our value is based on those around us. So we're constantly in comparison as well, of like, that person does this and I do this, so like maybe I'm lower on the rung, or maybe I'm this, or like maybe, or this is why I'm actually higher on the rung, or like when I hear people say things like, oh, this person does blah blah blah, I think I do it better, right? Like even doing things like that, right? Like it comes right back down to what you just said, of we're trying to figure out who we are, and we're using the people around us to determine that, or the things around us to determine that, or using how we feel about things around us to determine that. But like what we really could be and are invited to do is looking deeply inside of us to say, who am I? Who do I believe that I am? And then realizing that no matter who or what is around us, the core of what we really are never actually changes, right? And it's like always being reminded of that. Like, no matter what we believe, we are not what we believe. No matter what we think, we are not what we think. No matter what we feel, we are not even what we feel, right? Like, there's something else inside of us. And the more we can stay connected to that and source inside of us, the less chaotic things will be around us. And almost the more we can act from a place of not necessarily emotions, but of truth, right? Like the truth of who we actually are, which is not separate than anyone else actually around us. So I think this is like, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful. And then even like coming back to like the businesses that we run, especially, spiritual business and what success looks like in a spiritual business, coming back to, again, who we are and how do we express that through our work. Yeah.
I think there's like so much here. There's like so like lifetimes of wisdom and lessons that, like I'll probably spend forever thinking about, right? This whole lifetime thinking about. I think what I really come back to again and again is that you're your own best expert. You're the only one who knows truly what you need and what you're here to bring to earth. Like, and that's coming from two people, right, who read the Akashic records, which is supposed to be the energy of everything, and it is. Yet also knowing that you're the only reason the Akashic records will even come into your life is to empower you to become your own advocate and like, person for this stuff. It's not that ever. It's so important to remember that if you're, for example, if I was born in Ethiopia or Italy, and even if my name was Rita, my personality would be completely different. My beliefs about this world would be completely different. I'm this Rita personality wise because I grew up in Tampa, Florida. I have my parents. So I'm not really Rita. Like this is an identity that was created. I could go walk onto a plane, go to Australia, say my name is Lily, and that I, am a finance manager in New York City, and no one would know. And that's the thing about this. It's all created. It's all created because that's what for whatever reason, we've all bought into to how our world works. And there's a power though, when you're no longer attached to that. So with being of service, which is not anything related to identity or just, it's more of like I guess I should do that. Or yeah, that kind of sounds cool. It's not like I'm destined for this, or it's just more this like, yeah, I choose to do that because I'm just a human being and that's the life I want to live. You kind of take a radical ownership of your life and you're not as swayed by what you think you need to be or what you believe yourself needing to be anymore.
Just so much yes. So much yes to that. So much yes to that. Yeah, what a beautiful, almost like beautiful wrap or summary of just all of it.
I feel like we went the different, I feel like we just covered lifetimes. Like I feel like I went on a journey that was so cool and amazing. I hope anyone who's listening feels that way too, because I don't remember anything we talked about, which always tells me that it was like meant to be channeled through. And just for anyone listening, Marie and I even did like a little intention setting before this, and we asked for any fear that we had about what to talk about, or what we expected our human being self to talk about, or what our ego wanted us to talk about. We tried to push that to the side just to let what was meant to be talked about come through. So hopefully we did that.
Yeah. Oh, I feel I feel like mission accomplished. Thank you so much. Thank you so much,
Oh,
Rita.
but thank you.
Um,
I'm like lit up, like I'm like glowing. Like I'm always rejuvenated after these conversations. Like
yeah.
this is it. This is like for sure this is a measurement of success. Like when I have a conversation
Mm,
with like someone like you, like
mm,
this, like I can't imagine that this is like if I died today, this is happiness.
mm, I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. And just, I have to say, thank you so much for your openness, for your vulnerability, for just sharing, for talking, for flowing, for holding space together with me, for holding intention together with me, and everyone who might be listening. It's just such an honor to know you and work with you and be able to have deep conversation together. And I'm just so grateful for you.
Right back to you. I'm really grateful. Today was magical, and it's because you're who you are, or I'm
Mm.
who I am, but we're both who we aren't who we think we are. So it creates this a moment of magic. So thank you. And for anyone listening, your energy created it too. So
Mm.
it's it's fun to tap into that and also be like human and know that there's very human things we still have to do, whether you're doing a spiritual business or not, you hold both.
Oh, I love that. Okay, one last thing before we totally end. What are you working on right now in your spiritual business, and how can people find you?
Hey, so right now I have one-to-one offerings for spiritual coaching. I do offer Akashic record readings for anyone
Mm,
who's interested in that. It's not as much I'm telling you what's in your records, but more so exploring it. So if you're interested in learning more about your spiritual journey, that's a great way. And also launching another How to Read Your Own Akashic Records class. So if that's something that calls to you, that's something that'll be launching in July.
thank you so much. And to anyone listening, I have been working with Rita for over a year now. I on a one-on-one level, and also I've had readings together with her, and I highly, highly, highly recommend like any connection that you can make with her, because it will truly change your life and shake up all the things that you think you know about who you are and what it is that you're meant to be doing, and how it is that you can move through the world, and yeah, how you can connect back really in with yourself and your deepest level of consciousness and intuition and being.
Thank you. I love you.
You're so welcome. I love you so much.